Fabi Paolini, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
I'm so excited to be here with you today, Kyle.
I am excited to explore your brilliance. We met a couple of weeks ago, and you are on to some of my favorite things. And one of the things I love about people like us is each of us have our own blind spots, and it's always wonderful to receive the insights and illumination that we all provide. And I'm excited to share that and what you do with our audience today. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're showing up in the world today?
Yeah, so I am Fabi. I am a brand strategist, so kind of similar to Kyle. My focus is on messaging. And mainly what I do is I help experts learn how to speak to power buyers by amplifying something that I like to call their angle of mastery. And so what that does is that it turns what you do from a nice to have someday into a need to have right now. So it's really about how do we build demand through our content, through the way that we're communicating. But beyond that, I'm also a mom of three. I'm from Venezuela. We'll get into my story, I'm sure, in a lot of detail. But there's a lot of different pieces of me as well, apart from my business. But that's the gist of it.
I'm really curious. The first thing that really stuck out to me, the key word, is power buyer. What makes a power buyer compared to a normal buyer or maybe a not so good buyer? And how do we know what those look like?
Yeah. So for me, power buyers are people who are really determined to solve the problem that they have right now. So these are people that tend to be more decisive, more action taking, vision driven. They have a problem. And instead of just dwelling, maybe they might dwell a tiny bit, but more so it's like, I have a problem. What do I do? Who do I hire to solve it? Where do I go? Versus the people that just stay in a loop forever and ever in a problem. And mind you, I think that in a way we can all be power buyers depending on the problem, right? There's things that we are going to be quickly going to address to try to solve, and then there's others that we aren't. But my focus is really on building messaging that speaks to the ready to invest people, the people who are, not only problem aware, solution aware, but they're self-aware, right? They're looking for solutions. They're not in victim mentality. They take responsibility for their success in their life, and they do whatever it takes to solve it. So that's what I mean when I talk about power buyers.
I'm really curious about this. You've mentioned problem aware, solution aware, and self aware, which is a very high level of awareness. And something that I've been doing in my messaging, and I've noticed in those that I work with and my peers, is a lot of the times we only focus on solution aware messaging, which in my case, it would be like, you need storytelling or you need a talk. This is the solution to your problems. But it's not really talking about the problems that they're experiencing. And a lot of the times we miss out on a larger swath of our audience. But what you've just said is they have both a problem aware, a solution aware, and self aware, which is a little bit of a different in the classical progression of Eugene Schwartz, which maybe this is what you're referring to, or it's when I hear those words, that's who I think of. And I'm curious, so is this a very narrow group of people, and what are the advantages of marketing and messaging exactly this group of people versus trying to just go for someone who's solution aware or only problem aware?
Yeah, well, I feel like for me, obviously, most people are going to be problem aware. My focus really is on thinking about, okay, how do we speak to the people that have obviously awareness that they have a problem? But for me, when I talk about solution aware, it's mostly people who are actively looking for solutions. They might not necessarily have hit exactly on what the precise solution is, but they have the level of self-awareness evolved enough that they're looking for options onto what that may be. So to give you an example, in a lot of the work that I do, when I talk about messaging and when I talk about my audience's problem, I say you don't have a marketing problem, you have a messaging problem. So, for example, my power buyers are people who feel like they have a marketing problem, they have a lead generation problem, they need more traffic, they need to spend money on ads, or they need to get better at sales, they need more visibility. And so, through the work that I do, is I move them from that level of problem awareness, right, where they're probably looking for solutions focus on marketing, lead generation, all these things, to showing them that there's actually a different solution that they weren't really aware of, or actually even a different problem that is really the root cause of everything that they weren't really aware of. And so I'm kind of giving them an insight or a different perspective on that, what that is. And so when I talk about power buyers being like problem aware, solution aware, self-aware, it's really about, obviously problem aware is simple, but in terms of solution, it's more like they're actively looking for solutions for the problem. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily looking for your specific solution. I'm looking for the person that's going to specifically solve the angle of mastery piece, which is another part of what I do, for example. But it's more of, okay, how do I solve, in my case, my lead gen problem? And they're looking for that. And when they come across my work, they're able to realize, well, actually, no, well, maybe what I have isn't really marketing, it's messaging, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So I definitely want to get into the angle of mastery, but before we do this, I want to stay just a moment longer in this awareness discussion. Can you tell me about what it means and looks like and is to be self-aware? How do we see this in people, and how do we speak to somebody who is self-aware in your messaging strategy?
Right. So for me, the focus when we talk about speaking to people who are self-aware is really making sure that we're talking to people who are taking responsibility for their success, right? It's very easy to blame everybody else on, or the economy or the algorithm or whatever we want to talk about, as to the base of why certain things are not working in our lives, our businesses, our relationship, our health, whatever. And so when I really think about people that are self-aware, they're the ones that are able to recognize I have responsibility for what's not working in a way. And sure, maybe I've done programs where I've hired people who haven't given me necessarily the results that I was looking for, but they're still able to take responsibility and saying, well, I had a part in that, in maybe not researching correctly, or not hiring the right person, or not taking action, or whatever that looks like. So for me, self-awareness is really about recognizing your own responsibility in both the problem and the solution to whatever's going on, and having the ability to take action in that direction, right? So and I can speak from my own personal perspective in terms of building my own business. I've always had that level of self-awareness to recognize where my faults are and where my weaknesses are, and to really try to solve for those things, but not from a place of victimhood, but from a place of empowerment. So in terms of messaging, we really want to think about, okay, well, how does somebody who has that level of awareness, what are they going to resonate with? What are they going to connect with in terms of how we communicate to them? And what are they actually going to repel? Like, for example, for me and for a lot of the work that I do, I stand against a lot pain marketing type of thing, right? Like the bro marketing way, where we're using a lot of pain language and a lot of, you're frustrated and you're hopeless and you have so much anxiety and nothing is working, and that type of language I feel repels a power buyers. It repels me completely. The moment I see it, I'm like, that's not me. And so that's what I mean with self-aware. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it's such a fascinating school of thought. And I've seen this debate against pain marketing and pain sales, or pleasure marketing and pleasure sales. And I don't think it's necessary. Pleasure doesn't quite do justice to what exactly you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen people on each side of this spectrum, and it's one of the most interesting areas for exploration. And I think there's lots of people who you've got to find your own way into this and exploring that. And I think probably we'll see. So if it's not pain, I think the angle of mastery is what we really want to accentuate and share. Can you tell us what that is and what that looks like?
Yes, but I want to add something to what you just were saying.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a balance between both. I don't feel like the answer is going straight into pain and just talking and agitating the problem. But obviously, the answer isn't the opposite either, where you're saying, I'm going to help you live your best life. And so, which doesn't mean anything, which is super vague, and there's no problem that we're speaking about. So, there is a middle point to that where we're able to balance talking to the problem, but really considering who the buyer is. Who is the person that has the problem? Not just talking about the problem as if that's the only thing that matters. So I feel like that part is really important. So regarding the angle of mastery, so for me, the angle of mastery essentially is your big idea. It is the premise behind what you're doing. I find that when we're speaking to power buyers, and even not, right, even in the world that we live in, there's so many people, there's so many experts, there's so many quote unquote experts, right, and people who are speaking to your audience, and there's so much noise and so many people that we're competing with. What we want is to find a way to communicate what we do in the simplest way possible that really reveals our expertise and reveals the outcome of what we do. And so for me, that's what the angle of mastery is about. It's kind of like the big picture idea behind what you're selling beyond the specific program or beyond sessions or modules or, I'm a consultant or I do this or I do that. It's what is it that you're truly actually doing? What is the big idea behind that? And that to me is the angle of mastery, where we're kind of bringing together our level of awareness of the problem, our expertise, but then also connecting it to our audience in a way that they're going to understand it really easily.
I like this, and this solves one of the biggest problems and pain points that I think both of our clients that we work with, or people that come to us, they don't exactly know how to showcase their expertise or who they are in a way that's effective. And so, in my case, the people that I work with a lot of times will think that almost reading your resume at the beginning and showing all of your achievements and accomplishments, or trying to teach the audience as much as you know, and that will be the thing that ultimately gets them to connect the dots in their own head and hire you. And I found that this is a lack of self-awareness in a certain way. A lot of people that use this strategy end up wanting to, they feel a certain deficiency of self in who they are, and so they only lean on what they've done, and they are trying
Right.
again and again and again to prove themselves by proving their knowledge.
Right. And I feel like what happens, especially when we're speaking to people who are true experts at what they do, is that there's two main traps that people fall into. Either they're oversimplifying their message and making it sound extremely generic and simple. People are told you have to make your message so simple a fifth grader would understand it. But we have to remember that if we're speaking to power buyers, they're not fifth graders. And so there has to be some level of complexity. So what happens is that you end up dumbing down the message. And when you dumb down the message, you end up dumbing down the audience, right? So if it's too simple, it becomes like generic, cliche. But then the opposite happens as well, which is the other trap that people fall into, which is you're overcomplicating it. You're speaking at your level of, awareness of the problem, of the solution, of all of these modalities and techniques and mechanisms and things that are like, what did you, I don't even understand what you just said. Maybe one person in the world would understand it. So you're taking it to the other extreme. And for me, the angle of mastery is once again like finding the middle ground to that, right? It's saying, okay, how do we speak to my audience's level of awareness of the problem? Kind of like I was saying before, in my case, for example, they think it's marketing. So that's me speaking to their level of awareness, but then showing them my level of expertise and showing them, giving them insight on what the problem is, why the solution is different, and really showing them that big picture idea that makes it much more desirable than falling into the live your best life, find love sort of blanket statements.
Yeah. And one of the big things, just bringing this back to power buyers, or what you're saying, One of the worst things that I can think of, that when hearing some of these things or some of these common mistakes, is not repelling clients necessarily. I mean, you'll repel your power buyers for sure, but you can do these things and attract clients. But if you are attracting clients who, for example, don't take responsibility for themselves and their results, they're going to be nightmare clients. And one bad client is worse than having no clients, or several bad clients can really suck the energy from yourself and your business. And so there's a greater danger than not making money that's present here.
Totally. And I don't think that people understand often like how bad that is, because what happens is that you attract the I mean, one thing that I will add before I'll tell you what happens is that, it works. Pain marketing works. Using pressure and using pain, and you're falling apart in your life, it can work. You have to be a killer salesperson, but it can work. But what happens is that when you enroll these people and they're not getting results, they're, really stepping into your boundaries, and it's almost impossible to place boundaries. And so what tends to happen is that you feel like you have to overcompensate, and you start questioning, well, is it me? Is it my process? Am I doing something wrong? You have kind of developing imposter syndrome in a way. And really what happened is that the wrong person enrolled into your program, and you're making a promise that doesn't apply to that person. And so therefore, no matter what you did or no matter what they did, they were never going to get results. And that just starts eroding your confidence. And it's like this kind of downward spiral that is a disaster, basically.
Yeah. So, in terms of angle of mastery, how does this? One of the things that I'm hearing is that this makes a lot of my decision making process and my messaging a lot easier and more intuitive. And I think one of the biggest problems I see out there is everybody's shouting from the rooftops, you need to post 78 times a day, or you need to email everybody, and you need to be doing more, 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 more. And the answer is always more. And this seems like a nice framework that allows me to understand in myself what is enough instead of exhausting myself all of the time. Is that true? And what are the other advantages and unique aspects of your process and your methodology?
For sure. For me, it's about creating content that gives people insight and that activates buyers. And so, what happens, and I see this more than I would like, is that people create a lot of content, lots of things, just noise, noise, noise. I have to do more. I have to show up more. I have to do video. I have to be on TikTok and I have to be on LinkedIn. And it's like this machine where we're creating a lot, but it's not really moving people or getting them to feel like what you're doing is different. And so what I like to focus on through the angle of mastery and through something that's tied to that I have called the need to have formula, which is basically a process where we're kind of how we reveal the angle of mastery. Essentially, what we focus on is really on giving my audience insights and light bulb moments where they feel like, oh, I understand now what's actually happening. You're giving me a different perspective on the problem and the solution, turning your solution or making it feel more like the antidote in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And you're essentially making a case for that angle of mastery. And so what happens is that you need less content. You need less you still need to show up. There's
Yeah.
no way around that, obviously, but content becomes more effective. Just to give you an idea, in our business, we focus on taking people to a 20-minute webinar. It's 20 minutes long. That's it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like my main funnel. I run ads to it. My organic content takes people into that 20-minute video. And that video is the core of everything that we do. And what that video does is it reveals the angle of mastery. It walks people through my need to have formula process, all of that. It's such a simple process. And at the end of the day, it brings us sales every single week, like multiple sales every single week to 5K to 30K programs. And it's something very simple and short, but it's so insightful that it just clicks for the audience. And obviously for our clients, they're doing the same thing, right? 20-minute video. So it's not this thing where you have to create this absurd amount of content that is really complicated, or you go into a lot of tutorials or how to or 3 steps to blah blah blah, or stuff that is like, okay, great, chat gpt could have given me exactly that. For me, the angle of mastery is really about differentiating yourself and, again, giving your audience insight that makes those power buyers, especially when we're talking about power buyers, it makes them react and feel more activated. Because, I mean, with power buyers, they've invested in a lot of things, likely they've done a lot of things, and if you come to them with content that sounds like everybody else or like ChatGPT, that's going to be an issue, right? So it has to be something that makes them, wait, what? Feel like that.
Absolutely. So I love the simplicity of your system, the freedom that it creates. And I imagine there was a time in your life where you were experiencing a lot of the same problems that you work with on your clients, either being too simple or overcomplicated, attracting the nightmare clients, creating tons of noise, contents, and just doing everything that's draining your energy.
Mhm.
Are there times and moments in your life that you can remember that particularly resonate with what they've been going through?
For sure. I mean, I was doing all of it wrong, basically, right? And this is how I came to doing what I do. I have a background in branding and did an MBA, a specialization in branding, and my whole thing had always been branding and messaging. But one thing is having the knowledge, and another thing is having the actual wisdom and understanding of what that looks like in the world, right? And so what happened with me was that I was doing the bro marketing way of doing things. I was agitating pain. My message was extremely generic. Literally, it used to say, build a brand you love, which is very
Hmm.
different to what I do right now. And so I didn't necessarily have nightmare clients, although I did have certain nightmare situations, let's say. But it was more so that I had to really handhold them. My clients were not very resourceful. And so what that meant is that I had to be on all the time, doing everything, answering everything, and it was very draining, right? I was creating a lot of content. I was over explaining things. And, again, like all of the mistakes that people are making. And as a result of that, I was experiencing a lot of the things that people are experiencing right now as well, right? Leads that were really expensive. It was very difficult to make sales. I had a low conversion rate on sales calls, about which I think that in today's world is normal, but for me it was low. It was like about 25% sale on conversion rate. Right now we have about from 60 to 80% conversion rate on sales calls, to give you an idea
Wow.
of like how much of a difference that is. And so I wasn't getting engagement. I felt like I was putting out content and it was going into a void. I wasn't getting anything back, right? And mind you, power buyers are quiet. They're not people that are necessarily commenting on everything you do or engaging, but they're
Yeah.
booking calls and they're buying. And so for
Hmm.
me, it was like, it was like I felt like I was like running on a treadmill and not moving anywhere, kind of
Can
thing.
you give me a specific moment, a one of these nightmare situations, like a specific time? We don't necessarily have to have like name the client themselves, but what were one of these typical situations that you experienced?
Well, I'll tell you one that it's not so much that was a nightmare in terms of the client, but more so on how it affected my confidence. So, towards the beginning of my business, this was, I think, about 2017. So, I started my business in end of 2015, beginning of 2016, but this happened in about 2017. I enrolled somebody to work with me one on one. I think that back then I didn't have the group program. I launched that in 2018. And so she came to me. I built her whole messaging. But when she came to me, there were certainly red flags about her that I didn't
Hmm.
pay attention to. And she ended up paying in full and enrolling to work with me. But she paid it with a credit card and was like, I have $500 on my checking account, but I found this old credit card that I had here, and she paid in full. And so in my mind, I was like, awesome, great, perfect, right? But what happened is that as we started working together and we built everything, we built the brand, we built her messaging, we built her website. I helped her create a webinar similar to what I was doing. And so when everything was done and we launched everything, she was like, okay, where are the clients? And I was like, well, now you have to go create content, put yourself out there and bring them. And she just did not understand that, right? It was one of those things where she thought, well, if I just build it, they will come, right? And so this woman who had barely any money and hired me and paid me, she was in such a place of lack that she wasn't able to do anything with it, right? Not create content, not put herself out there. She didn't know how to do any of it. Even if I had given, and I did give her back then a lot of information on like, here's what you need to do, her expectations were off because she wasn't an ideal client, right? Even having the money, it's not enough. And so for me, it made me feel so bad because I just felt so guilty that this woman had given me her money, even though I did my work as powerfully and effective as possible, right? But there's more to that than just having the website and the messaging. And so it really affected my confidence at the time. So that's a good example, I feel.
I think that is a good example. And I would love to hear more about your inner dialogue as this is happening, the judgments that you had about yourself or the situation. What were you thinking about this throughout this process?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a lot of guilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guilt and shame in a way because I felt like I had let her down. And, I mean, I could empathize with her a lot, right? Of where she was coming from. But again, it was like that mix of, well, you need to take action with this. I don't have a magic wand. You have to actually do something with it. And the feeling of like, I feel responsible for this woman and I need to do something to help her bring clients. So it just really eroded my confidence a lot, to be honest with you. It made me feel imposter syndrome. It made me feel like, it was my fault and all of these different things. And in reality, it was my fault, but in the sense that she should have never enrolled. It was that this was something that happened even before I understood what power buyers were and who to enroll and who not to enroll. And that just because somebody has the money, it doesn't mean that they're your ideal client. So yeah.
That's a good one at the end. And then tell me about a moment of the opposite frequency, maybe in your life. Maybe you got to take a vacation. Maybe you had a great success with a power buyer who took the right responsibility, converted easily. Give us a specific moment of the opposite frequency.
Yeah. So for me, when I see my clients succeed and when I feel them get it, right? So one thing that's important, Kyle, is that I'm not a lead generation agency or company, right? Again, this is a very drastic difference of what I used to do when I began, and I thought that that's what you needed, the tangible. I'm going to help you do this, that. It's still tangible, except it's just different, right? And so now my focus is really on helping my clients understand who their power buyers are. How do I communicate that? How do we communicate the angle of mastery? How do we make it feel like a need to have? And so what really lights me up more than anything and is really having these clients come to me saying, I finally feel like I can clearly articulate what I do. I have a brand and a message that really represents who I am. And because of that, then I'm going out and I'm building success. And I've had these incredible success stories of clients like hitting 100K months and just high sales income numbers. But again, that's not the core of what matters most to me. What matters most to me is actually helping my clients build a message that matters for them. Like feel like they're creating something the thing that they want to be known for. And so when they nail it, when they get it, when they understand the frameworks of how to express what I do, how to articulate it effectively, when they get on a call with somebody and that person starts reciting their message back at them, for example, that's when they feel like this is incredible. And that's what lights me up, right? And in my case, personally, when I see in my own business, right, For example, today we just made 2 sales, right? And enrolling to people. And I work very short hours during the day, right? So I work from 11 to 3, Monday through Thursdays. On Fridays, I don't even do any calls or anything. It's when I schedule out emails for the following week. But I work 11 to 3 because I have 3 kids. And in the afternoons, I typically pick them up from school. And I'm doing homework with them in the afternoons and hanging out and all of that. And so for me to say, I'm working few hours and everything is so optimized and done so efficiently and effectively that it's bringing in the right people, and I'm having these insanely beautiful conversations with people that are my perfect fit, that is amazing. Having a system that I can trust is amazing.
Beautiful. Would you like to hear your story?
Yes, please.
Where are all my clients? This is one of the scariest things that you can hear from one of your clients. This was a woman who at first seemed like a good client. She paid in full on a credit card, but there were a lot of red flags that I had ignored at the time. And at the time, you see, I had a lot of knowledge, but not very much wisdom. I was new to marketing and branding, and I was just taking anybody who would get into the door. I was doing a lot of bro marketing, trying to hit pain points as hard as I could, post as many times in as many places, and just barely squeezing by on my sales calls. I feel like I had to work so hard to get people in the door. And once I got people in the door, things seemed to get worse. Like with this one particular client who paid in full at first, and we built a webinar and started to launch everything. And when it was all completed and I felt like my job was done, she said, "Where are all the clients?" And my jaw dropped because I realized that just because somebody could pay me in that moment doesn't mean that they were a good client. And I told them, "You have to get them. You have to go bring them. You have to go find them." And this was news to both of us that she didn't understand that. And she didn't know how she was going to start feeling this or doing any of this. She was in such a place of lack, such a place of challenge, needed so much hand holding to get across the finish line. And I realized in that moment that I was in the wrong place. I felt guilty that this woman had given me so much of her money. Shame that I had let her down. Was I really any good at this? Was there something I missed? Was there something more that I should have done that I could have done? Should I even keep going in this world that I had spent so much time and money investing in myself and my education? Am I good enough for this? And it was on one too many experiences just like that that I decided something needed to change about my messaging, about who I wanted to attract, and how I showcased myself and attracted those people. I didn't want to just get anybody in the door anymore. I wanted to bring in power buyers, buyers that were easy to sell to and sign up with, and would take responsibility along with me to get the results that I knew were possible. I needed to have a formula that would showcase my mastery and also let me know when I had done enough every day so that I could spend more time with my family and my kids. I wanted content that would activate buyers. And so when I got onto my sales calls, it was an easy, simple process instead of trying to force people in the door, and gave me the opportunity to see the red flags of the people who were wrong for me. And I started to being able to turn away people instead of letting everyone in. Now, friends, this would take a long time and a lot of costly and painful mistakes. But over the course of years, I started to develop this formula. And now I'm working only a few hours on the weekdays, taking just a few calls. I have clients that are coming in ready to buy. I have a 60 to 80% conversion rate on my sales calls. And I open up my emails every day to people saying, I finally feel I can articulate what I do. I finally feel represented in who I am. I wake up every day excited to go to my desk and work on this. And I can confidently close my computer off and go spend time with my kids and help them on my homework and pick them up from school. Now, this mastery is not some secret formula available to only the very smartest people. This is something that you can learn and you can showcase. And it's easier than you might imagine. So today, I'm going to show you just how you can do that in your own life and in your own business.
That was epic. That's amazing how you're able to do that. I loved it.
Thank
That
you.
was really cool. Great
Absolutely.
storyteller. I mean, obviously not surprising, but that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, it gives you a new angle to showcase your own angles of mastery and share yourself on more podcasts and in more places in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really, really good. Thank you so much, Kyle. I love that.
Absolutely.
That was awesome.
And to close things out, do you have any final thoughts for us or the audience? And where can we go to learn more about you?
Yeah, well, I would say if you're having a suspicion in terms of your marketing, like I was saying before, and something feels off, you feel maybe like you've outgrown your audience, or you feel like you've outgrown the message that you've been sharing. You know, leads don't that are coming in aren't quite the right people. Sales are harder to make. It's very likely that what you have is actually a messaging problem. And it's, whether you're in the beginning phases of your business or you're super well advanced into it, and whatever the case is, it's really taking a chance and looking at what is that angle of mastery, what is it that I really want to say, what is it that matters to me more. And so that's what I would say. I have like I mentioned before in the episode, I have a 20-minute training that really explains this in much more detail. You can find it at powerbuyerclients.com, and you can find me at Fabi Paolini everywhere.
Beautiful. Fabi Paolini, thank you so much for joining us today on the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here, Kyle.